Okay.
Let's bring out the flight sim.
Okay. We are recording. Let me go ahead and bring up the iPad. I hate my life. Okay. Okay, welcome back everybody, and I'm going to be recording a short video today. What I'm going to attempt to do, and I'll go over it in my briefing a little bit more in depth, what we're going to do is we're going to practice some VOR navigation, flying out of Waco Regional and flying towards the Austin Bergstrom International Airport. We may land in Temple, or we may fly all the way to Austin in one leg. It just depends on how we're feeling and how the video is going at a certain point. But we'll get into that in a minute. Let's go ahead and start up. I'm going to pretend that we have already completed all the pre-flight inspection. So what we're going to start with is our cabin checklist, and I'm just going to go down it and check them one by one. So, before we get in the airplane, we're going to check the pitot 2 cover, remove it, check for any pitot blockage. Then in the cabin, we're going to verify that we have a pilot's operating handbook. We're going to make sure that we've already done our weight and balance checks sheet. Make sure that the parking brake is set in the airplane, control wheel lock has been removed, all the locks have been removed, that the ignition switch is in the off position, and that the avionics master is in the off position. Okay. Now the very first thing we're going to check is the electrical system. So master switch on. We're going to make sure that the prop is clear right now, just in case there's some errant connection. Okay, and we're checking that the annunciators for the low fuel quantities go off. We're checking our fuel quantities. Okay, we're going to turn avionics master on. This is going to be so we can do an audible test for the avionics cooling fan. Once we hear it, we're going to turn avionics master off. We're going to go ahead and do static pressure source valve in the off position. And then we're going to test our annunciator panel, and I don't have a testing annunciator panel in this aircraft. Basically, we would push the test button, and we would look that all the lights light up on the entire annunciator panel. We're going to go ahead and move the fuel shutoff valve into the both position, the fuel selector into the both position, the fuel shutoff valve into the on position. We're going to go ahead and extend the flaps. Okay. We're going to make sure pitot heat is off. We're going to pitot heat on. We're going to make sure that the pitot tube is warm to the touch within 30 seconds. We could skip that. It's 53 degrees Fahrenheit outside. Master switch is in the off position. Elevator trim set for takeoff. Baggage door check and lock with key, and autopilot static source opening is not installed on this airplane. So we can do the before starting engine checklist. Pre-flight inspection is complete. Passenger briefing. Okay, so we're going to take off from Waco Regional. I've got my taxi diagrams pulled up, and we will bring those up in a minute. Once we take off from Waco Regional, we are going to fly towards the Temple VOR, the TPL VOR, and I have my nav radio frequencies for my VORs written down. From there, we're either going to land or we're going to continue on to Austin Bergstrom, flying towards the CWK VOR. And if we are going to fly the leg to Austin, then we'll land at runway 17 left using an ILS approach. And I have my navigation frequencies written down. Now, I'm not going to do any of the communication as we fly because I don't have VATSIM hooked up right now. So we'll just be focusing on navigation. I'm just going to assume that I have the clearance to do the maneuvers that I'm doing, and I will call them out before I do them. Okay, so before starting the engine, let's see, we did passenger briefing. That looks good. Oh, there will be a couple times during the flight where I'll be able to go over details about my simulator and stuff when we're flying the long leg to Temple. So that part, I'll answer some questions about kind of my build, etc. We would also do an emergency briefing at this point. In the event of emergency, we will pause the simulator and we will exit the flight simulator because it's a simulator. We're not going to practice emergencies right now. Okay, brakes, test and set. Seats and seatbelts adjusted and locked. Circuit breakers are all checked in. All electrical equipment off. Make sure the avionics master switch is off. I'm just going to re-verify that. There's on, there's off. Okay, fuel selector valve both. Fuel shutoff valve. Push full in. Avionics circuit breakers check that they're in. Pre-start checklist complete. Let's go ahead and look at starting the engine. Okay. Throttle is going to be open a 1/4 inch. That's not a quarter of the way, that's a 1/4 inch. Mixture in the idle cutoff. We're going to open this window. We're going to yell clear for the prop. Master switch back on. Flashing beacon light on. Okay, we're doing a cold start here. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn on the fuel pump. We're going to do full rich. We're going to wait for stable fuel flow, and it takes about 3 seconds. Then we're going to go idle cutoff, fuel pump off, and then the engine will be primed. And once the engine's primed, we're going to turn the key. And as soon as the engine fires over, we're going to advance smoothly to full rich. So again, here it goes. Fuel pump on, full rich. Waiting for stable fuel flow. There it goes. Fuel pump off. Idle cutoff. Did that the wrong order, but it's fine. Okay, and here we go. We're going to start the engine and advance to full rich. And let those avionics master should not be on. And let those RPMs drop back down. Okay, we're looking at oil pressure first. Very first place we go is oil pressure. Make sure we're in the green. Okay, nav lights, we're going to go ahead and turn them on. Electrical system, we're going to skip the electrical test, but in the electrical test we would bring landing lights and taxi lights on to test the ammeter. We're going to go ahead and test the load on the system, so we're going to bring it to 1500 RPMs. Making sure no annunciator lights come on, and we're good. Okay, back down to idle. Avionics master can now be turned on. Radio's on, flaps retract. Mixture lean for ground operations. We're at 1500 AGL, so we're fine. A little bit below rich, but we're going to go ahead and lean. To lean, we're going to bring it up to 1200. And we're going to pull it out a little bit. Back in a little bit. And then the mixture's properly lean. Let's take it back to 1000. Okay. We are ready to go. At this point, I would contact ground operations and let them know of my intent to take off. They're going to go ahead and give me a runway. The runway we're going to be taking off of at Waco Regional is runway 19. So that's the first thing we'll do is we'll bring that up. Okay. I think it's this one. Yep, that is it. So right now we are over here by the terminal. We are just going to have to turn and taxiway onto Alpha. and then we can do an intersection departure from Alpha 2. So we're going to go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead and take the parking brake off, and we'll go ahead and start our first right turn here. Give it a little bit of power, and we'll begin our taxi. Alpha to Alpha 2. It's telling me that Alpha is going to be right. I see that out my left window. Looking at my taxi diagram, just making sure everything lines up. And this should be Alpha. Let's take a look and just make sure. Yep. Let's bring up my real-time GPS and take a look. I did make a mistake whenever I taxied off. It's fine, it can be corrected. I'm actually on what appears to be a maintenance road instead of Alpha. But they were pretty close to each other, so we're just going to taxi back towards Alpha. Taxiing is the hardest part for me. It's very difficult because every time you taxi almost, you are in a new spot. So what I expect this sign up here is to tell me that Alpha is this taxiway right here. And this intersection of them appears to be a helipad, so no traffic. Just to prove that I'm not lost, we'll take the taxiway like I want. It should be Alpha to Alpha 2. Another possibility is that my airport diagram isn't matching up with the in-game textures. That happens every now and again too. But we look on course now. Taxiing a little fast there. Especially with the wind in my back, that's not advised. Okay, while we're taxiing, we're going to go ahead and test, things we should have done. Test ailerons. Should have tested a left turn, right turn. Test the brakes. Go ahead and look at our engine temperature right now just to make sure that we are good for a run up because we are approaching Alpha 2 right now. Okay, I'm going to take my left turn down to Alpha 2 and then I'm going to hold short of the runway marker. Okay, we're holding short of 19. I'm going to go ahead and put on my parking brake right there and bring up my before takeoff checklist. And we're almost ready to go. Okay. Parking brakes set. Passenger seat backs, upright position. Seat and seat belts check secure. Cabin doors closed. Both of them locked. Flight controls free and correct. And then I should look behind me and make sure my rudder's free and correct. And it is. Double check fuel quantity. Mixture rich. Fuel selector valve. Recheck both. Left both. Right. Both. Okay, we're going to do the run-up. So what we're going to do is we're going to throttle up to 1800 RPMs. Ooh. Took off the emergency brake there. 1800 RPMs. And we're going to check our magnetos, and what we're looking for is that there's not a 150 RPM drop on either magneto. So, magneto 1, both, magneto 2, both, and then check our vacuum and check our amps, and we're good. Check the annunciator panel, it's good. Throttle, we're going to put it back to idle. Verifying that we're going to idle and not the engine's not going to die. We're going to ground idle, we'll call it 1,000. There we go. Okay, strobe lights, we'll go ahead and turn them on. Radios and avionics. Okay, so the very first VOR we're going to fly to is Temple. On takeoff, it's 110.40. I'm going to go ahead and punch that into nav 1. And radios are set. Nav GPS switch and nav mode set. Autopilot off. I'm going to set the autopilot's altitude to 4,500 feet, which is my intended cruising altitude, just in case we want to engage the autopilot once we get on our way to that VOR. Autopilot off, elevator trim set for takeoff, wing flaps set for takeoff. We're going to do 10 degrees of flaps. The tow heat is on, brakes release, we're ready to go. Doing a normal takeoff, what we're going to do, I'm going to pull into the runway and get myself lined up real fast. 19. Okay, now the wind direction is 8 knots from 340. What that means is that we're going to have a pretty strong crosswind component on the takeoff pushing us to the right. So what we're going to do is we are going to power up smoothly to full, and I'm going to watch that the plane does not veer off to the right. Rotate speed of about 55 knots. When we rotate, we're going to be trying to trim down for airspeed. You see the plane wanting to tip that way, we do left rudder. Lots of left rudder. Lots of left rudder. Full left rudder. And there's rotate. We're going to trim down. Trying to get 70 knots and about 200 AGL. And then we'll do flaps up whenever we get those two metrics. So there's 70 knots. AGL, everything looks pretty stable. We'll do flaps up. I'm going to just let it fly across Lake Waco while I do two things. I'm going to go ahead and change my OBS indicator so that I get a bearing for that first VOR as soon as possible. Should be a southerly course flying towards the VOR on a bearing of, call it 195. We go over here. We'll put the bearing at 195, which is about 5 degrees to my right. And we'll go ahead and make that adjustment in the airplane. A small 5-degree bank right turn to 195. Passing 1,500 feet now. .4 miles from the first VOR. There's our first bearing. That looks pretty good. With the wind pushing me in that direction, I should be able to follow this course, making small deviations on the way. Let's go ahead and pull up my real-time GPS. See ourselves passing over Lake Waco right now. Passing 2,000 feet. With a climb speed, it's a little faster than normal, but that's fine. Almost 80 knots with a ground speed of about 85. That's fine. Yeah, turn a little bit to the right. Getting another bearing from my OBS indicator, just to verify the direction that it felt like I was drifting. Passing 2,700 feet. Lake Waco is actually a pretty big lake, apparently. Passing 3,000 feet. And I'm just taking a look at all my engine instruments, just making sure everything is right. Approaching 3,500, I'm going to make another little minor course correction to the left here, or towards the eastern direction. We're headed a little bit west of south. I want to head a little bit to the east of that. That was probably a real confusing way to say that. There's a pretty cool little bridge out here to my left window. Let's see if we can get a closer look at that, see what it's called. Highway 340. I'll turn that off so I can move the map. Twin bridges. It's pretty cool looking. It's a big bridge that crosses Lake Waco. I mean, that's at least passing 4,000. Okay. On my cruise, all I'm going to do is I'm going to start by reducing power. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to control my altitude with my power and control my airspeed with my trim. So I'm going to reduce power to slow the climb, and then I'm going to trim down to increase my airspeed from that loss of power. So 4,400, so here we go. We're going to trim down we're going to power down to about 2,200 RPMs, and then I'm going to trim down for airspeed. And if the plane starts falling too fast for me, I just apply a little bit more power. Trim down for airspeed. I'm going to go for a cruise speed of about 105 knots, and I'm going to go ahead and make that left correction. Trimming down for airspeed. You can see the plane's wanting to climb as I take that left turn. A little bit more power so that I can trim down even more. And there we go. That's stable level flight at 4,500 feet at about 100 knots. I can see that my OBS indicator is falling off. I'm going to make sure that I can tune that back. Give myself another bearing. It's a few degrees to my left. $16 miles out of Temple. I'm going to go and click the autopilot for a couple different reasons. So we're going to click the autopilot on, put altitude hold, heading switch on. Move the heading mode a few degrees to the right. There we go. Power down a little bit. Okay, so a couple things about the simulator that I want to talk about. The first thing that people have asked me about is how I get these views like this, because they're used to having their triple head to go or whatever, Ifinity setup, whatever it's going to be, and they put one huge 5760 by 1080p display right here. or they put one big 3820 by 720p display, whatever the case may be, depending on their graphics card. Now, that's not what I do. I have 3 separate windows here. Each of them has a virtual cockpit view, and if you do 3 separate windows, you can put 3 separate camera angles, essentially, in. I don't find it any more taxing on the system than having one big window. I actually find that you get a lot more situational awareness with this setup, because if you actually look, I mean, this is a 270-degree visual. You can actually zoom back and get a lot more situational awareness and sight out of what's going on in the airplane than you could if you had it as one big display. So if you haven't tried a setup like this ever, I highly recommend it. I switched to it like this, and I'll never go back. You can also see that in my past videos I had the one big main display out of 3 monitors, and this is vastly superior. Second thing that I did recently was I got a little cheap tablet from Best Buy for $40. And I gotta tell you, this was a huge upgrade for the simulator, because you no longer have to pause to get information or stop your flying. You can get it all right there after you go. So if you forget a radio frequency, or if you need to look up a SID or a star or something, it makes it a lot funner. And it's a lot easier to use than pieces of paper, because pieces of paper aren't easy to use. You could have hundreds of them to hold what you can hold in even a cheap tablet. So if you don't have a tablet, I highly recommend it. There's lots of neat apps and stuff too. I would think of buying a $40 tablet the same thing as adding a monitor to your flight sim. Extremely good upgrade. What else do I want to? Oh, as far as like cost of flight simming, my whole setup is, you're probably looking at less than $1,000 price point. So it's nice and not that expensive to get into. Okay, we're 5 minutes out of Temple. I've decided we're going to land at Temple. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take us out of autopilot. Now I'm going to go ahead and start procedures for descent. So I'm going to back off power because I have quite a bit of altitude to lose in these 10 miles between me and the airport. And I'm going to pretend that they've given me approval for a base to make traffic towards the airport, and let's do a base leg and then a final turn for the runway. And we should be able to do that. So the first thing I'm going to do is get myself lined up on this descent for a base leg for TPL. So let's go ahead and do that. Cutting power. I'm going to bring it back to about 1600 RPMs and start shedding off some of this altitude while I get myself orientated on what would be an extremely long base approach. Turn on my tablet, and I'm going to bring up the ILS information for my runway. So TPL is ILS runway 15. All I need is a navigation frequency for that ILS or DME or whatever it has to be. I need to find out what it is and what its frequency is. And I keep bringing up the wrong diagram. Let's try that again. ILS 15. Here we go. So it's DME approach on 111.5. Let's go ahead and put that into our nav. 111.5. Take one last look at our orientation compared to the VOR. We're about 8 miles out of the airport, so we're going to go ahead and click over to 111.5. Okay, our localizer pops into life. Looking at our direction of approach, it's going to be runway bearing 156. Let's go ahead and set that. 156. 155, 156. And it's telling me that the glide slope is a little bit above my aircraft right now, which is fine. We're going to enter this ILS approach at 2,400 feet. at the first marker. So I'm going to cut power even more, and let's see if we can expedite our descent. SAZ, okay. There's 2400. The glide slope is far above me now, so I can keep my plane going level until I intercept it. And I'm just at this point trying to slow the airplane down while descending. Or while descending or maintaining level flight. We're going to go ahead and do a first stage of flaps. And all I'm doing is controlling vertical speed with power, controlling airspeed with trim and yoke. Second stage of flaps. Going to take a look at our position on the real-time GPS. Let's put it in map mode so I can see more than just terrain. Let's try that again. Map. There we go. Glide slope is still far above me. That's fine. I'm going to go ahead and make sure that I can intercept this runway bearing 156. So as soon as that needle starts to swing towards the middle, I'm going to institute a left turn so that I don't intercept and fly right past it. And this should actually be a tricky landing because you can see I have a huge cloud bank to fly into here. So this is why it's good to have some knowledge of ILS approaches, even if you're flying purely VOR. Because imagine if this cloud bank was 15 degrees to the left. It would completely block all side of the airport. A little bit, I guess we're below the clouds now. Okay, the needle's starting to swing. And I'm going to start instituting a left-hand turn to slow that rate of swing. And before it swings back, I get level. Like so. Not level, but, oriented to 156. And we look like we're on 156, so we're good for runway heading. Glide slope's still far above me. Still don't have a visual indicator of the runway. 8 miles out from the airport is what my instruments tell me. We're just going to trust them for now. We're flying alongside this little inlet. And it looks like that goes down to the city of Temple. I'm going to start making corrections here. Okay, we're starting to intercept the glide slope. I just saw that needle move, so it'll start to move pretty drastically whenever it starts to go down. Now, it's completely okay to be above the glide slope, especially in a small aircraft like the Cessna. I don't need to land right on the numbers. It's completely fine for me to go 60 feet past them because I have a 7,000-foot runway below me. I'm practicing safe skills. Take a look at my wind because I'm getting some considerable gusts here. Glide slope is starting to come into view. You see both needles are moving, so I'm having to adjust the airplane in both ways at once. Now, I'm a little concerned that I don't have a visual on the runway yet, so let's take a close look. Oh, okay. It's just further out than I thought, that's all. Okay, and this is a pretty well lined up approach. I'm going level or falling at a very, very, very small amount. My plane is not losing or gaining airspeed. You can see that these needles are starting to become more and more sensitive, but it's also very easy for me to control them. Again, controlling airspeed with pitch and controlling altitude with power. So the glide slope is below me now, so I just need to cut altitude and start making corrections to this bearing so I can get lined up on the runway again. Everything's looking good. The glide slope is still far below me. Okay, I've got my first visual of the runway. This should be runway 15. Actually on a bearing of 156. Now there's a taxiway right next to it. I want to make sure I don't line up accidentally for the taxiway. You can see that it's a few degrees to my left. So watch this needle as I intercept that course on my screen. And there we go. As I intercept it, I need to make that compensating right turn. Now our wind is blowing from a direction 340. So let me think real fast, because I'm not that fast about what type of landing we have going on here. It actually should be almost negligible impact, so I should have the wind blowing dead in my face, so we should be good. Glide slope's far below me now. Now I'm going to start really thinking about my altitude. I'm going to do somewhat of a banana approach, where we come in and swoop in, and then at the end lose a lot of airspeed fast. Going to power down. This is just so I don't pick up too much airspeed as I do this controlled descent right here. Another alternative right now would be throw on a third stage of flaps. Because I'm already committed to this approach, we're just going to leave it as is. Looking at my VSI, you can see I'm falling really fast. That's fine. I just want to see where that glide slope starts to move. Just watching this. As soon as that starts to move, I can throttle up a little bit, and then I can pull back on the yoke, like so. And there, I've intercepted it. Now I can control my descent a lot more, looking at my VSI and airspeed. VSI and airspeed. I want to touch down, going about 65 knots or less, and I want a nice soft touchdown. VSI and airspeed. There's 65. Now I just got to make sure I can make it to the runway. Adding power if I need to. Light as a feather. There's 60 knots. Plenty of room. We're going to flare. Cut power. There's my... We flared a little too early. That's fine. We're not going to stall yet. Flare. Flare. Okay. A little bit of a rough touchdown. We hit it about 400 foot per minute. That's fine. Gonna flaps up. Let the plane roll. Could have slammed on brakes and gone for that intersection, but I'm not going to do that. We will go for this one. I'm not going to want to cross that runway in front of me, so we'll turn off here. And then once we're off the runway, we will drive to a marker, and we will find out where we're at. So let me bring up our airport diagram. We are in Temple. go. And I'm going to taxi up to this fuel holding facility right here. Looks like it's short of taxiway Delta. And we'll power down the flight right there. And then the next time I go flying, I guess we'll fly from here towards Austin, or I'll try something completely different. Well, let's not crash into the fuel. So we'll hold there. So parking brake. And let's bring up our securing checklist. Now, that wasn't the best landing in the world, but it wasn't terrible either. It was a very good approach. I would have liked to hit the ground a little bit softer. I thought I could have done a better job in the last 10 seconds there. So let's look at securing the airplane. After landing, tow heat off, wing flaps up. Should have done that. Securing the plane. Parking brake is set. Autopilot. Electrical equipment is off. Avionics master. First thing to off. Mixture, we're going to put to idle cutoff. Ignition switch in off position. Master switch in the off position. Control locks, we're going to install the control locks. I'm going to go ahead and flip all my electricals off. And then fuel selector valve, left or right. We'll go ahead and put it on the right. And there we go. No cross-feeding, and we are cold and dark again. So we would get out of the airplane and go grab us a snack, come back, and fly to Austin. So thanks for watching. I hope to make more of these videos as I learn more about aviation and as I progress through the coursework. So thanks, everybody. Bye.